It's no secret that the autofocus from the newest Lumix cameras, the S5 Mark II and the S5 Mark II X, have leaps and bounds improved over their predecessors from the Lumix family. Now utilizing phase detection autofocus, they can now keep up with the big boys from Sony and Canon. In this video, we're gonna go through the entirety of the autofocus menu in the S5 Mark II and understand how it affects the autofocusing capabilities from this camera so you can get the most out of it. First, let's go through the autofocus modes.
Yeah, childlike creativity and humility, Lord, I need it. I'm like a fetus, cause I depend on you.
We're gonna do this from screen left to right. First up, we have tracking. In this mode, you tap on the screen the object, item, or person that you want the camera to track, and then it will create a little box around them and it will track them. As you move the camera, it will keep focus on whatever you tapped to begin with. Now, it's pretty smart, but it's not perfect. I found in my experience, it does hit the mark most of the time. So really, it just depends on what you're tracking, the movement that you're doing, and how much you're moving the camera, and I guess a little bit of luck. Full area. This is most likely to be what you'll have the camera on 90% of the time. If you do content creation, talking head type stuff like what I do for YouTube, I basically leave it on wide because I want to make sure from over here, I'm in focus from over here. However, if you're focusing on an object, there are better modes to use than this, such as the tracking mode I mentioned previously, or some other modes like zone. Zone lets you basically tell the camera, this part of the screen I want to be in focus, and it will ignore everything outside of that zone. You can expand this zone and stretch it outwards, but not upwards. An interesting choice, but it is what it is. It's still a zone of the screen. And also, if you do want to go upwards and outwards, then there are actually other modes that help with that. Okay, the next two modes are basically the same, but there's like one small difference, is what it is. One area plus. This mode has a specific box that the camera focuses on, but it allows for a larger outer area of focus for the camera around the main box. You can see here with the main thicker lines that this will be the main area of focus, but the thinner outer lines are also where the camera will look to rack focus if it can see that the subject that you're focusing on is like going into those lines. It will it's basically like a little area of forgiveness. Like if you did have it centered, but your subject just went a little bit to the left and to the right, then it's like, okay, well, I can still see them in the outer lines, so I will stay on that subject. You can also change the placement of this square very easily, either using the joystick or just tapping on the screen. And you can even change the size of the box by using the joystick first to move it around, and then using the camera's dials to change the size. One area. This is basically exactly the same, but it doesn't have those outer thinner lines, so there is no forgiveness. It is very strict. If your subject goes outside of that box, it will no longer be in focus, and that is basically just a stricter version of one area plus. Those two modes, I guess zone as well, are what you would use if you want to just have center focus. It's just that you have the flexibility to move those, but also that's something to be aware of. You may move those points by accident if you're not careful and you nudge the joystick or you touch the screen, so bear that in mind if you're just trying to use center focus. If you're using it to film a person, I'd recommend using wide. If you're using it for an object, then zone, tracking, one area, any of them should be good. Now let's dive into focus settings. And yeah, we've got a bit to go through here, but bear with me, grab another coffee. Also, I apologize for my voice, just throwing this in quickly. I'm currently getting over a cold. I feel like maybe a few more days and I'm good. It's also almost my birthday, so kind of like coughing and sneezing on my birthday. It's gonna be great. Starting off in the AF page in the camera settings, you will see the first setting, AF detection setting. This basically just determines whether or not the little box that shows up around your head and crosses over your eye shows up on the screen or not. Your autofocus will still work if this is turned off. I personally like to have it turned on, so then I know for a fact that the camera knows there's a face there and knows to focus on the eye. It just gives that extra reassurance to me. Next up is detection subject, a much more interesting setting because this basically determines what your camera is going to be focusing on. We have three choices here: human, face/eye, and human/animal. Human makes the camera focus on the entire subject of the human body. It will detect a human based on their body, torso, and face. It's a pretty safe option for filming people generally. Face/eye prioritizes faces and eyes of people. How this differentiates from human is rather than just looking for the frame of a person, it will now focus more on the face and eyes of a person. So it can still see people, like it knows what a person is, but it prioritizes focus onto the face, and if it can detect it, the eyes, which is obviously what you want to have critical focus. I usually use this setting because I'm basically vlogging, or I'm the subject like 90% of the time, or if I flip it onto my friends, then it's just them in frame. So it's the best option for me. Animal/human is the same as the human setting, but now the camera will also look for animals as well. This isn't as detailed as having like a bird setting and then a dog setting and then like a wild cat setting, but it can figure out what an animal is versus what a human is, and it does a really good job. As you can see here from Arlo, he doesn't look too happy to be held in front of the camera, but it's nice that my camera can pick him up because I do like to film my dogs from time to time. Okay, the next option, AF Custom Video. This is where we're going to customize the speed and the sensitivity of the autofocus. A pretty important setting. The AF speed setting changes how quickly your camera will rack focus. With AF speed, you can make it super fast, so if you're focusing on something moving fast, then your camera will be able to keep up, and obviously if you drop it down a lot, then it will take longer to rack focus, but this is also cool because it can be called more cinematic and a bit more of a traditional sort of movie look. Faster racking is great for vlogging just because if you're doing a lot of movement, walking around, whatever, it will keep up with your fast pace. But if you're doing like a short film on your own, having that slower rack may be more useful. The AF sensitivity slider will determine how sensitive your camera is to subject movement and the threshold at which it will decide to rack focus. So you can make your camera basically super jumpy and react way quicker, or you can make it a bit more relaxed and decide to rack focus after more time from when your subject has come out of focus. Okay, the next setting to go through is focus limiter. This is quite an interesting focus setting that Lumix included because it's pretty niche, and I can see the use for it if you do like a lot of product stuff, or like you're blocking out a scene and you have your actors who are only going to go from like one point to another point and they're not going to go any further than those points. This is where this would come in handy. Basically how this works is you set a limit as to how far and how close your camera can focus. What you do is you can set point A and then you can set point B, the close and far points, and it will not go any further or closer than those set points. I can see this being really useful for product shots or setups where you need the focus to be extremely precise or repeated. The next setting, continuous AF. This is, it's very straightforward. Do you want autofocus on or off? But also, do you want autofocus to work when you're not recording or only when you're recording? I have this set to mode 2, so it's always working, but here you can see with mode 1, it only works if I hit record on the camera, and then of course turned off, it just means there's no autofocus. Kind of weird it's in here, but hey, it's there. I would recommend you have it on mode 2 because I think it's a bit silly to be wasting battery and storage space on your SD card, letting the camera then get focus when you could kind of prepare before you hit record. At least that's how I see it. Okay, and the next setting, AF Light Assist. This basically just turns on or off that front light on your camera that helps the camera focus in dark situations. I'm sure you've seen that little orange light that shows up when your friend's taking a photo of you and it's like dark or whatever. I think it's that, because I've not actually seen it turn on. I don't know exactly, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. The next focus setting, focus peaking. This is a big one. Focus peaking is super useful when you are manually focusing. Peaking is basically, it's those lines that appear around whatever is in focus of your shot. It's what makes focusing manually a lot easier, as you have a visual aid on screen to show critical focus. This can be the difference between your eye being in focus or your nose being in focus, and I bet you know which one you want in focus. Within the focus peaking menus, you can change the sensitivity, the color, and whether or not it's shown during autofocus or manual focus. And you can have it for both as well, but for autofocus, I leave this off because the camera's doing it all for me. I don't need to assist it by having lines to, anyway. But for manual focus, there are further settings. You can change the sensitivity, which will determine at what point the peaking lines will show up by how much something is in focus. So the more sensitive something is, the more these lines will show up, even when something is just starting to be in focus. And lowering this means that something has to be like critically in focus before these lines show up. I have it set to +2 because I want to know the full range of what is in focus and be confident to know like, okay, I've got like the focus plane that's on what I want it to be on. Okay, and the final setting on this page, one area AF moving speed. It sounds weird, but it's actually a very simple setting. Basically, you remember the one area squares we spoke about earlier where you can tap and it's a little square on the screen. It basically is how fast you want that square to move when you're moving it around with the joystick. You have normal and you have fast, and that is it. You can decide what you're more comfortable with. I actually usually have this on fast, but I would recommend putting it on normal, and I'm going to switch it to normal because if I want to move the little square somewhere fast on the screen, I can just tap it. But if I want to be a bit more precise, it makes more sense to have the joystick be slower than how it is on fast mode, because I may want to move the square over 3 pushes to the right, rather than pushing it to the right 3 times and it's all the way onto the right side of the screen because it's set to fast. Now that we've covered all of the main focus settings, these are the settings I'd recommend you guys use if you're focused on content creation like me. This is my typical setup for my YouTube videos because I do like to move around a lot and have like a lot happening in my shots, but I also don't want to max out the sensitivity and speed so that my camera is super jumpy and overreacts to movement. It goes without saying, if you're shooting different things to what I am, then your settings will probably be different. There are some deeper autofocus settings that we can go into, like 3 pages worth of autofocus settings to go into. If you guys want a even more in-depth, full rundown of every single autofocus setting in like the deeper pages, comment below and I will, I guess I'll have to do it. If you guys want to know what my favorite lens to take advantage of the S5 Mark II's great autofocus is, check out this video here and I'll see you there.